Hey guys, so I have a little bit of a video request from Heidi over at Rain Country Homestead, and the topic she wanted me to cover was how do I make money on my homestead. So obviously any of you that watch me now know that part of that is our YouTube income, but I will back up a couple years to when we didn't have YouTube income. And what I really did back then was I wasn't actually making money on the income I wasn't actually making an income as far as having greenbacks come into the homestead. What was happening was that through some very specific skills I had, I was able to double what we could do with the income that my husband brought in. So John used to work for FedEx. We never made more than $40,000 a year, and he made us more than enough money because we were able to pay off one car loan. We'd only had one car loan at that point, but we foolishly took it out when we didn't need to, and then we paid that off. We paid for 2 childbirths, we paid for a knee surgery, we paid for John to get LASIK, we paid for a hospital stay for him. In other words, we didn't have much money coming in, but we paid cash for everything because of the skills that I had that I was able to put into action when my husband was at work. The first thing I would put out there is that I knew how to cook from scratch. So everything that we cooked was from scratch. We store our bulk long storage commodities in buckets, and we store them whole. We do not... Okay, little one, tell us about your feast you made for us.
So, Kaya did the potatoes, I did the carrots and the ham roast.
And it smells so good. So what seasoning did you use, honey?
Seasoned salt.
Seasoned salt. And it smelled... I went outside because I needed to change water, and I thought I smelled something that just smelled like the best barbecue you've ever had. Then I was really disappointed because I knew it wasn't ours. And then I'm like, wait a minute, the wind is blowing in my direction and I'm downwind of the house.
And it was smelling from the house.
To begin with, even before we had farm animals. And then once we did have farm animals, I was able to turn food from one into food for another, into food for another. And so I had some skills where I was able to do a lot of bartering with neighbors for things that they felt like they needed. And they had something that I needed, and so we just swapped. For instance, when we raised pigs, I didn't actually put money into the pigs. I would raise 3 pigs. The other 2 people would purchase my pig for me, and then the other one would purchase all the feed for everybody, and then I would put in all the labor to raise the animal. I would, and I did it in the winter, which was when nobody else wanted to do it, and I had abundant food for them because I was taking old potatoes and old pumpkins and old grain, old food storage from people that I would go gather food storage from people who didn't want it, and I would cook it on our wood burning stove and I would feed the pigs. And so after 3 months, I would have nothing but sweat equity into it. The other people didn't have to put any sweat equity into it, and they did the purchasing and I did the labor. And so it worked really well. So we'd have 2 or 3 pigs into the freezer every year doing that. Let's see, with our milk goats, what we did was that I would use extra milk and whey from cheese to feed the pigs. The girls are finishing up their grain. We received at least 6 inches of snow last night. Yesterday we had bare soil. And can you see my eggs? I need to gather eggs. And I didn't have a clean milk bucket, so I just milked into one of the pigs' feed buckets, so the pigs will be getting a gallon of milk as a Christmas treat. Quite the snow, huh? This is why I milk the girls in here, because in the summer I milk them out there. It just gets too hot in here. But in the winter it's really nice to have a little shelter when it's windy. Pigs that we were feeding that somebody else had purchased, and we had cheese in our fridge and we had milk in our fridge. And we also went and bought $7 bum lambs. We got them started on a bottle really well with goat's milk, and then we would sell them for a significant profit depending on how big they'd got. We started out at we'd sell them for 20, 40, 60. The longer we'd had them, the more we sold them. By the time we'd had them for a couple weeks, we were selling them for $80 a piece. They were well started, fat and happy, and 4-H'ers would come purchase these baby lambs from us that were already started on bottles. So we made a lot of money during the lamb season from our milk goats. But then I would save all that money from lamb season and I would buy hay with it. The other thing we would do is we would sell little buck goats to people who wanted to use them for hiking and pack animals. We would leave them intact depending on what people wanted to purchase, and we'd sell baby goats for $80 a piece as little bucklings with everything still intact. And generally we wouldn't have them more than a couple of weeks. So we never kept more animals than what we could afford to feed and do a lot of bartering on. So for instance, we would keep 3 goats at a time, 1 milking, 1 bred, and 1 in the background just as an extra. And that way all of our goats gave at least a gallon a day, usually 1.5 gallons a day as a minimum, even as first fresheners. So we had more than enough milk. And then with extra milk and extra whey, we would then add that to our chicken feed when we were raising meat chickens. And again, we were using old food storage from people whose basements we had taken food storage because they didn't want it anymore. So we had very little that we actually paid for. When I did pay for feed, I would use money from having sold an animal or sold a product to buy hay, and once a year we would go and buy grain from a feed mill for $5 per 50 pounds. And so I would buy all my feed for the year for $80. Hey guys, we are on our way about 45 minutes from where we live to go get feed for the chickens, the ducks, and the pigs. And what we do is we get fodder grain, which is grain that's not fit for human consumption. Okay, so this is our bird grain for the winter. It's 1/2 ton. And this is what it looks like this year. This year we had all that rain. So it's very, very dusty and has a lot of chaff in it. But because there's so little of it, it was still worth getting. I like to have it bagged because then I can stack it where I want to. It's easy to pick up and move for that. As far as firewood, I would chase the tree service guys, and when they were cutting trees down, I would go and ask them as they started, They are squishing the branches down as if it was hay so that it has more space, because the goats can eat all of this, or we can put it into living fences or baskets or whatever we want to. We'll probably have to make several trips just because branches are space consumptive. Okay, are you ready? I have this. I'll come haul it away for you. Please, can I have it? Also, I live in that house right there. I'll give you $20 if you'll dump off the wood chips. And so then we would have all of our Back to Eden gardening, our mulching for throughout the year. And it was well worth it for me to hand them a $20 bill and say, please dump the mulch in our yard. Because before that, I had felt like we didn't have enough money to do that, and I had done it by hand, and I almost killed myself. It was a very bad idea to be doing that kind of hard labor out in the sun in the quantity I was doing, and I was doing a lot of mulch by hand, and it was very foolish. Always protect your hands. Always protect your body. It's one thing to be out exercising and doing work and feeling good about yourself. It's another thing to just be beating yourself to death and not having the right equipment. And sometimes you have to look at your husband and say, no, honey, this is something we actually need to spend money on. And that was hard for me because John was working really hard, and we were working very hard to get our house paid off, and we had these financial goals that we needed to make, and it was a point of friction at times because there were things that I was trying to do on the homestead that a few extra dollars, $20 here, $20 there, would have saved my body a lot. But at the same time, we had worked out a budget together beforehand, and the times that I wanted to deter from that, to slide away from that, it would start to snowball. If I need $20 of mulch, then maybe I need $20 worth of feed, and if I need $20 worth of feed, maybe I really need greenhouse plastic. And so there was a balance there of free versus money you really need to spend versus commitments you've already made to your spouse about what you should and shouldn't be spending money on. So there is that balance, and it was not always easy. And it is the main reason we are here today is because I saw that I somewhat selfishly was asking for money from the family budget that had been put to other purposes that we'd agreed upon, but I wanted more of that money to put onto my permaculture projects and to my homestead. And so that is the whole reason I started a YouTube channel, was because I wanted to be able to afford to buy mulch and to buy feed and to buy my experimental animals. I wanted money to do all those projects, and it wasn't fair for me to expect my husband to be willing to take from our limited budget and spend it on them when we weren't getting anything out of it. So there's the crux, is make sure that you're not straining your family with what you're trying to do on your homestead. It's really, especially if it's not a shared dream, it's really not fair to do that, and I don't think it's wise. And so if you want the homestead to succeed, I think you do need to reach out there and maybe look for some unconventional ways that you can make money on the farm. For me, I was getting really good at breaking even, but then when I needed to make a big investment, my husband was always there with me when we bought our amazing milk goats. He was the one that had to come up with the cash, and he did. And he was really good at squirreling money away and doing that. And yet, sometimes it took time for us to see those returns. As far as I had goats that I sold for $450, $250 for a new young doeling, which was good money. She was definitely worth it, but I didn't make that kind of money on my goats until I'd had them for 3 years. And so that initial investment, it took time to get there. And so I don't really know how to tell you how to make money on a homestead. I can tell you how to break even on a homestead by doing a lot of bartering. But the thing is that because most homesteaders homeschool and they're cooking from scratch and other things, it's really difficult to actually make money from your homestead if you don't have some pretty big financial push at the beginning to set up your systems. A lot of people who do make money on a homestead, people like Justin Rhodes, they took out loans in the beginning to get started. And they're not even homesteading anymore as a living. They're YouTubing as a living. And so let me think. John Martin Fortier and Curtis Stone, they both have market gardens. They're not even homesteading. They're not doing animals. They had to have some loans at the beginning to do things like greenhouses and to buy property. Curtis Stone didn't buy property initially, but he did eventually purchase property and have a mortgage. And that was what he had to do to progress his business. And so if you want to turn it into a business, sometimes a loan is what you have to do. If what you're trying to do is grassroots and just feed your family, then don't aim for profit. Instead, aim for break even. Because it does take money to do the appropriate infrastructure so that things move smoothly, and so that you actually have profit, right? So other people who've done it would be people who already have family land, like Joel Salatin. Yes, Joel Salatin makes a good living, and so does his family. But his parents had that property first. Maybe that was Baker's Creek. With Baker's Creek, he started as a child, and if you know Baker's Creek, the seed catalog, he started as a child, a fascination with seeds. He started his own little business, but it took years before it was something that developed into a business that could support a family. Even if he started at 8, it still took him 4 years until he was 12 to actually be making any money at it. That's still 4 years. And by the time I think he was in his late teens, early 20s when it really he was in his late teens, early 20s when he really took to the road, if I remember correctly, and started to find these seeds and really turn it into a big business. And so now here he is later, he has 10, 20 years invested in this company that is now known worldwide. And so unless you're going to take out a loan, there is no real fast growth. And if you do take out a loan, there's no guarantee that you're going to succeed at making money, because if you haven't actually tried it the hard way and the real way, you really don't have those skills. That is the thing that all these people who are now making money started with. They started with zero. They got the experience. They figured out what it was their people wanted, and then they learned how to market. And all these people started out, like John Martin Fortier, the market gardener. He started out as a woofer, even with his wife. They were woofing. They were on rented land. They did it for free. Curtis Stone, the urban farmer, he started out renting people's backyards, and sometimes he did a barter where he'd give people fresh fruits and vegetables in exchange for letting him garden in their yard. And so they started out with nothing, and then when it got to the point that they realized it was a real business and it was making money, that's when they took the loan out. And so I guess I'm not telling you guys what it is you want to hear, which is how do you make money on a homestead. What I'm telling you is how to tell when to make an investment in your homestead. And that is that I believe you need the experience to know what it is you actually want to grow, what it is you actually want to do with your homestead, have your own sweat equity and money into that. And then once you have learned how you want to make a living, then a lot of times taking out a loan is something that is involved. And I'm sorry to say that. Even us with our YouTube channel, there were certain points where we had to buy new equipment. We didn't have the money for it, and we bought it, and we paid it off as quickly as we could, but we had to have some of that infrastructure. And I know with the Dave Ramsey way of everything, that's not the happy answer. But in my experience, it's been the realistic answer, is that in order to make money, you have to put money to work. And I was really good at breaking even on the homestead. And that was the whole goal of homesteading, is to be able to be with your family, have better food, have wonderful experiences. And so I don't think that making money on a homestead is necessarily everybody's goal. And I think that if it is your goal, make sure not to forget the main objective, which is to spend more time with your family, to love what you're doing, and to create an inheritance and a heritage, and be part of what you believe so strongly in. And I will say that it takes, in my experience and the people that I know, it takes years to really learn what it is you're doing and find ways to make it profitable. And if you want it to happen faster, you're going to be dumping a lot of money into it, and without a guarantee that it will work, because you do a lot of learning and a lot of mistake making those first years of your homestead. So hopefully this is helpful, and thanks for Heidi. And how can I forget your husband's name? He's on And So Snarky on every one of my live shows. What? Heidi, Patrick. There we go. Heidi and Patrick. Thank you so much. And everybody go check out Rain Country Homestead, and we'll talk to you later.